Hello and welcome to our first installment of Students Speaking Up. My name is Andrew. I'm a senior at Poolsville High School and co-founder of Students Speaking Up. The onset of the COVID-19 pandemic and the necessity of distance learning has taken a toll on the social and emotional well-being of the county student body. Students from across Montgomery County have demonstrated a desire to connect more deeply and directly with their peers and receive meaningful mental health support. As a result, this program is being launched by students for students in collaboration with MCPS-TV and the Montgomery County Office of Student Wellbeing and Achievement to address this pressing need and create a platform for students across the county to express their voices on issues that impact them that they find relevant to the lives of young people today. We're here today to talk about distance learning, what it's been like for our panel, some of the challenges that they may have faced, and what they hope to see moving forward. Queen will start us off.
Okay, so thank you everyone. As you know, I'm Queen Belina, co-founder of Students Speaking Up and a junior at Winston Churchill High School. I'm also an intern for the MCPS Division of Restorative Justice, School Counseling, and Student Leadership Services. So now Andrew has given us that wonderful introduction into what Students Speaking Up aims to accomplish. Let's begin by asking our questions to our wonderful students who are here today. So for the first question, we'll start with Arvin. It's been a year of quarantine. What do you think would surprise your past self the most about what has changed?
Yeah, I don't think any of us really expected for it to last this long, to still be on lockdown like an entire year later almost now would definitely have come as a surprise to me. But I think I would definitely have been the most surprised by just how routine everything's become. I think, we've all had to adapt our lives into a virtual setting, and while there have been ups and downs, I think we've all, in the past couple of months, have had to find a new sort of normal.
Okay, next up is Isra. Thank you for that, Arvin.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree that I did not think it would be lasting an entire year. But I think besides that, the fact that I've been able to, and I know a lot of other students have been able to still connect with other people and even make new connections. I've found a lot more opportunities to get involved, to meet new people, to learn about different initiatives that are going on. Especially with a lot of the events that have happened over the course of quarantine. So I think just being able to act upon that, even in a fully virtual setting, would probably be the biggest thing that surprised me.
Thank you. A lot of the reason that we did invite you specifically is because all of you here have really stepped up being student advocates despite the challenge imposed by quarantine and really work to connect with your peers and better the county and our education system for them. So lastly, Mahi.
Yeah, so I definitely agree with both of the other people who spoke. What I would say, something that has surprised me the most is probably the amount of self-growth and resilience I've seen not only in myself, but in others as well. This pandemic has really taught me how capable I am. It's also gotten me to appreciate myself a lot more, and it's led to lots of productivity in my personal life, which I honestly don't think would have happened if it wasn't for COVID-19.
Thank you. And it's interesting that you bring up self-growth and just the ability to develop yourself over quarantine. And so kind of segue into our next question, how we start off with you. How have you been practicing wellness while undergoing remote learning? Have you picked up any new hobbies or passions?
Yeah, so I mean, along with all the hobbies and passions that I've picked up, like I said, I've really been focusing on myself and trying to better myself and really understand myself as well. Along with that, I love student advocacy. So I've been doing lots of activism over COVID-19, along with lobbying, lots of grassroots work. Along with that, I've also picked up a lot of lost talent. So I've gotten time to paint, I've picked up learning the electric guitar, a lot of things like that, which I never thought I would find myself doing. So things like that have really helped me understand myself and understand what I really like to do a lot more. And I think that the amount of time that I've gotten to do all these things, I probably didn't have before COVID, and I wouldn't have had all these realizations about myself.
It's good to hear. Thank you. Isra, how about you?
Yeah, I think wellness oriented, I've really learned about time management and how important that is. Just understanding when I should allocate my time, how long I should spend on the different responsibilities I have versus the things that I do for enjoyment. There have been a lot of responsibilities that come with school, with all the different activities that I've picked up, the different initiatives that I'm part of. And then obviously that's created a lot of stress. So just allocating time to de-stress and enjoy the hobbies. Something that I've done to enjoy myself is journaling. That helps with time management, but it's also a creative outlet. So I definitely recommend that. I think it's a really enjoyable thing, but it's also really healthy.
Thank you. Arvin, how about you?
Yeah, I think as far as wellness goes, it's really important to make sure I'm not sitting at my desk all day. I know it's really easy to fall into that trap right now. One thing I know a lot of people have been doing is going on walks, even if it's just, around the neighborhood. I really think it's critical to make the effort, go outside, stand up, whatever it might be, just to avoid sitting down all day. But yeah, being in lockdown for so long has definitely allotted me more time to pursue my commitments. It's the small things like not having to commute anywhere. It really adds up, and there's been a lot of places where we find ourselves having more time than we had beforehand. But yeah, I want to relay what Mahi said. I've been pursuing advocacy, even if it is virtual. I think there's a lot of ways to get involved and give back to your community, and I've been trying to explore those.
Okay, thanks to all three of you for answering that. A large part of the reason that we launched Students Speaking Up is because we wanted a chance to have students connect across the county and acknowledge that we know that lockdown is hard and quarantining is not easy. So it's all about making sure that students don't feel isolated and think that they're alone facing different issues. So thank you all for sharing your stories. And with that, we will move into our next question. How has the year been for you so far? And what have been some challenges you faced due to the new learning format? Because as you know, Zoom school is very different than a traditional classroom. So let's start with Isra for this question.
I think coming into it, I definitely thought that it would be a lot easier than regular school. And I feel like a lot of other people felt that way just because now we have a lot more time to focus on other things. If we want to study and we didn't have as much time beforehand, now we technically do. But I think the challenges that have amounted from that kind of counteract that. So I found that myself and a lot of other people I know find it really difficult to focus and pay attention. I think that there are a lot of different distractions that are around you, especially in your home setting, that aren't in the school setting. And I've just been pretty unmotivated. I think that a lot of the different global events and community events have kind of put a damper on my optimism. So it's been difficult to find that motivation and try to power through, especially when we have been in quarantine for so long and it's only now starting to slightly get better.
Thank you for bringing that up. I do know that many students throughout the county have been feeling almost disillusioned about the way that things are going, but it is inspiring to see how many students are stepping up and trying to create change based on all the problems they see the world facing. So thank you for that. Next up, let's have Mahi.
Yeah, I just want to go off of what Isra said. I completely agree. It's really, really difficult for a lot of students to feel motivated to be productive. And I feel like throughout quarantine, a lot of students have lost even, the amounts of motivation that they had from the beginning. So that has been definitely really difficult for a lot of students. For me, one of my challenges is the learning format as a whole. So I know for a lot of students like me, it's really difficult to learn just by watching, teachers teach, or just, learning by listening to teachers teach. So it's been really, really difficult to understand how to actually do things because I, for one, am a very hands-on learner. I need lots of activities and things to understand the activities and the material that we're learning in school. So just things like that. I know that's really difficult to incorporate on an online virtual platform through a Zoom meeting. So just things like that have been really, really hard to adapt to and work to create an environment where I can actually understand things and learn them, which I know is the case for a lot of students as well.
Thank you for that. I do hope the county takes into consideration different learning styles, especially as we transition back to in-person learning, because obviously while we're in this hybrid setting, we will have to consider the vast array of different styles and needs that students have. Okay, so Arvin.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, it's really been difficult this year. I know a lot of people have struggled. I think it's been difficult for the county to accommodate for the needs of all our students, but I think that's really important. Remote learning personally definitely has pros and cons. I appreciate being able to move at my own pace, which is something that I think remote learning has kind of granted. But I think it's also really important. I definitely miss having that time to sit in class, to be face to face with your teacher or your classmates. It's definitely more difficult to engage in what you're learning. And I think that in-person learning, while it has a lot of benefits, I think that remote learning also has pros and cons, but I know for a lot of students, it's been difficult to engage.
That's understandable. I personally am someone who needs to like sit down with a teacher and have them like explain things and draw things out, which does not translate well to virtual learning, as you may assume. So with that, let's have Andrew tell you all the next question.
Yeah, thank you, Queen. So our next question is, what's your biggest fear about the return to in-person school? Have you opted to go back or chosen to continue with virtual learning? But we start with you, Arvin.
Yeah, personally, I'm continuing to engage in remote learning as opposed to going back to in-person school. You know, while I definitely miss aspects of in-person school, I think there still is a lot of validity but behind concerns about health. I also, I think another concern as we transition back into in-person learning is equitability in our education. I think that it's kind of difficult to create learning that's accessible to everyone. And while we have this, half in-person, half remote kind of situation, I think that it's going to be difficult to accommodate for all students. And I think that's something we need to prioritize.
Yeah, thank you. And it's interesting that you bring up equity because I know that's discussion not just for students, but just for staff and just everyone really involved in this process in general. That's a huge concern. I mean, not all our teachers are vaccinated and they're going back. Different students just feel different levels of safety with returning. So yeah, I think that's a really good point. How about you, Istra?
Yeah, I have two fears. One of them is obviously that things aren't going to be as safe or as secure when we immediately go back. I think that there's a lot to do with safety and with just making sure that all students are safe from each other and from staff and everything like that. And I think the other big fear is that people, and this includes myself, will not be used to it, and it'll take a very long time to acclimate to the in-person setting. I've actually opted to go online as well, just because that has been something really present for me, is just not being able to get used to all of this after more than a semester of online learning. So I think just having people try to get used to taking tests in person, sitting in actual classrooms when it's a completely different environment that you've been in for the past few months. I think that's a really big problem that a lot of people are afraid of facing.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think that's something that's just not really being talked about as much, not just obviously all the steps for just safety that we have to make sure that we go through in general, but just how are we going to interact as students with our teachers? Just social interaction as a whole has just been changed so much by this pandemic. So I think it's a really amazing point that you bring up. Thank you. Mahi, what about you?
I agree with everything Isra just said. One of my main concerns are also, safety, but then also I'm really afraid that students may not be able to fall back into their normal routines as, we used to prior to COVID. I think that because throughout this whole quarantine, a lot of students have understood that we have different learning styles and things like that. So it's going to be difficult to ensure that every single student's learning capabilities are met, and every single teacher's capabilities are also met. And so I think that's just one of my main concerns. It's going to be really difficult, and I want to ensure that students aren't just launched back into the system, expected to be able to understand things just like they used to, and be able to do things just as they used to. Same thing with teachers. It's really important that we ensure that it's more of a gradual return for everyone, because I know it's going to be really difficult, not only with the safety concerns, but also with the teacher and student aspect and trying to get back into the system the way things were, and ensuring that everyone has a system that works for them so that they can work to learn and understand the material in ways that work best for them.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you. Okay, so Queen will say our final question.
Okay, so a lot of you have talked about the challenges of virtual learning and your fears about the transition back to hybrid and eventually in-person learning. But what aspects of virtual learning would you like MCPS staff to continue? What would you like to change? So sort of the pros and the cons and things you don't want us to leave behind later on. So let's start with Mahi this time.
So I really do believe that a lot of students really like having Wednesdays a support day to handle all the things that they do and get support from teachers. So I think that is an aspect that definitely should stay with virtual learning, even if a lot of students do end up going back to school. Along with that, I really do think that communication online has been much faster. So I think that those aspects of school should continue. What I do believe is something that needs to be a little bit changed is the way that students are learning and things are taught. So, like I said, for me, for example, I am a kinesthetic learner, so I really would hope to see a lot more activities, be a little bit more hands-on for students, so that it's easy for students to understand. And I want to ensure that every single student's needs are being met. And so, every single type of learning style is also being addressed, and students have the opportunity to learn in different ways.
Okay, thank you for that. Next up, let's have Arvin.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Mahi. I think that having that asynchronous wellness day has been really helpful for a lot of people. I've definitely seen that and like to see that continue. But one thing I've been thinking a lot about is how remote learning has engaged with accessibility to education. I know MCPS has made a lot of efforts to provide all students with resources, computers, Wi-Fi to kind of engage in that remote learning. While in-person school can sometimes be difficult for people to access, I think MCS taking those steps to provide those resources has in some ways allowed for equitable access to education. That being said, technology I know can also serve as a barrier. So I think it's really important for MCPS to continue to leave, open options for some ways of remote education outside of just instructional time, whether it be turning in those assignments in different forms. I think that it's really important to have those options to be equitable to everyone.
Thank you for that. It does appear that, as Mahi said, asynchronous learning days are something that students really benefit from, and it does allow people to connect with their teachers, especially when class time is so limited in the quote unquote Zoom room. So lastly, let's have Isra finish up.
Yeah, I think that was my biggest good thing as well, that we've been able to implement specific time for students to connect with teachers. And that goes beyond just Wednesdays. I know like a lot of my teachers have had outside of that office hours that people have been able to take advantage of. So I think that's definitely something that should continue to be implemented just because continuous accessibility to your teachers and being able to speak with them one-on-one outside of just class has been proven to be really beneficial. Some of the stuff that I'd change, I think the way that a lot of teachers think or treat the work that they give, a lot of the time I've seen like for Wednesdays, I've been given a lot more work. I think a lot of teachers tend to have the idea, and the county as well, that students have a lot more free time or a lot more uh, kind of attention span for work. And I think that's false. I think myself and a lot of other students have a bunch more responsibilities. They have a lot more that they have to focus on that I don't think is being accounted for by teachers and by the county. So I think just being more mindful of the fact that online learning doesn't necessarily equate to more time to focus on learning.
Okay, so as all of you know, that was our final question for the pilot episode of Students Speaking Up. We all appreciate how much you thought through your answers and also the advocacy you've been doing outside of this one short video, because we feel, and we know that you feel as well, quarantine and everything that has accompanied it has really demonstrated the necessity of adaptability and really making the best of a bad situation. It's shown that the ways that we traditionally school our students do need to be looked at to ensure equity, accessibility, and so many other issues that people face day in and day out within MCPS. So I will not re-summarize Students Speaking Up for all of you because you do know what the program is about, but at its center is highlighting the student voice, the student experience, and students' opinions, because no one can speak for the NCS student body except the students that attend school within our county. So before we end, I'd like to leave us with a short quote by Lema Bowie, who's a librarian activist and also a Nobel Peace Prize laureate. She once said that we should be bold, step out, and never walk on tiptoes, because anyone who walks on tiptoes can never leave footprints. And The reason why that's important is if you want to leave footprints for people to walk in, if you want to leave a legacy behind and affect the students in Montgomery County coming after you, that does involve being open about the issues we're facing and also speaking about ways to solve them and really addressing that they exist. Because acknowledgement doesn't go far enough and action does really help all students within the county. And that's why we're happy that you've all been advocating for issues you care about as part of MCR, MoCo Empower Her, and MoCo for Change. And we do hope that other students see this pilot episode and are really inspired by the work you've been doing and want to share their own stories about mental health, challenges in regarding equity, racial discrimination, and the plethora of other issues they face every single day. So to end, we want all interested students to go to tinyurl.com/students-speaking-up to give us some contact information, tell us more about why they're interested, and we will get back to them with more information. So thank you all, have a great day, and we do hope to have your continued participation with Students Speaking Up at some point in the near future.